Hello, welcome to another Keyframe coach review. I've got a shot here from Michael. Ooh, spoilers, let me just turn those drawings off. So I've got a shot from Michael here, and Michael says, this is a lip sync I'm doing for a class. The mouth is very rough at the moment, but the body is almost done with blocking. I'd like a review of mostly the body. I'm trying to finalize that before moving onto the face and lip sync. Thanks. Cool, let's go ahead and take a look at the shot.
Oh no, sir, this wasn't built by a magician. This was built by a wizard, a man who can actually do what magicians pretend to do.
Nice.
Oh no, sir, this wasn't built by a
Okay, cool. So I like the bones of your shot. I feel like there's things we can do to maybe push the ideas that you currently have in there. Like you said, I'm going to stay away from facial stuff mostly, but if there's anything I have any ideas on, I can maybe mention those for you going forward. But yeah, let's have a look. As with my previous ones, I've already done some drawings. Turn on tracing paper. So first of all, I just wanted to talk about the initial pose. So we kind of look at it. There seems to be, I'll get into one more like this. This is more of the final sort of pose. So if you look at his line of action for his body, I think for me what stands out is if you look at this angle and this angle, they're just the same. And then there's sort of a bit of a curve through here, and then this sort of goes this way. So there's not a whole load of flow. There's not one kind of solid line through that body. There's not one kind of line of action where maybe this is like this and this is like this. So I just think we could maybe get a bit more of that. I did two drawings here. I feel like this one maybe isn't actually leaned back enough. It's not kind of smug or casual enough. So I think or maybe that one was the one that was. So I think you could kind of work, I guess, between these two kind of poses. Obviously, this one is a bit more leaned onto there. If you wanted, you could maybe even push it further. I think maybe that's going a bit too far considering this is meant to be kind of unstable and crappy. But yeah, just getting a bit more of a line of action, getting these hips sort of doing the opposite to create that curve. It feels like you're kind of forcing that curve through here when you have these basically in line doing the same thing. One is just kind of moved over to create that curve rather than that curve being created by kind of having opposing lines in there, which I think would help. And then I guess the other thing to note is just trying to get a bit more 1, 2, 3 in this arm pose, just so you kind of feel, you just read the pose a bit clearer. You have a clear kind of 1, 2, 3, and nothing is kind of stacked. Yours is not super stacked, but you know, it's still got a little hint of 1, 2, 3 in there. I just feel like we could be a bit more graphic with it, and you know, almost like hang off the edge with that one, and just yeah, just be a little more graphic with that.
Oh no, sir, this
And then I thought here for the screwdriver, kind of like the gesture that you're hinting at here.
Oh no, sir, this wasn't. Oh no, sir. Oh,
I just
no,
think
sir.
when you've got a prop in your hand, you would probably gesture with that prop rather than have the prop and do a gesture like with your finger. It's kind of also like, even looking at that in my camera, it's not super clear because you kind of got two lines. So I feel like I would maybe gesture instead with that and go, oh no, sir. So hold that and almost treat that like an extension of his hand. So if you've got a prop, try and use that prop for your acting, because it's always kind of going to be a bit more of a more unique choice versus just no prop, because essentially you're kind of ignoring the prop here and just having him as if he doesn't have the prop and he's doing this. So if we've got prop, let's use the prop. Just going to turn off that audio. Here was just kind of toning down that movement that you have, so it's more of a he's just kind of proud and he's like just almost does like a gesture, maybe makes it a bit more isolated. I think what we have here is kind of like a big kind of movement. It feels quite like he's really craning his neck and stuff rather than just like a little hint of a look how good I am. Just almost like a throw to that. Like I'm really good, and as you can see, you know, the results speak for itself. Just felt like a bit too much of a pose change, and he kind of goes down there a bit too long. So yeah, I would maybe just tone that down, keep him a bit more isolated, and just make it like a head gesture, and not get so much of the body involved in that. You know, you've got this hand coming out here. I would just limit that just to be essentially reacting to what the rest of your body and the head does, rather than making it like the hand does this and the head does that. I would just make it more like you're gesturing with one thing. I'm all for multiple things kind of gesturing at the same time, but it's almost like you would want it to be layered. So you'd maybe have like the head go like that and then the hand would come out afterwards, rather than kind of two different things happening at once. Just feels a little bit like over animated and pose to pose. So whatever you can do, try and kind of keep your gestures isolated a bit more to individual areas of the body or individual body parts. And then here, I felt like he could still remain in that kind of relaxed, leaning, you know, he's smug pose. And similar to what we said about him just using his finger instead of the prop that he's got, or thumb there, sorry. I would just, you know, if he's got the prop, rather than kind of going and having two silhouettes there doing the same thing, essentially, you've got the pen or the screwdriver and you've got his thumb. I would just do it with just the screwdriver. You've got the prop, so let's kind of use that as an extension of his body. Oh, I guess I was just drawing a starting frame here to then work out these mechanics. So if we look at the mechanics right now, feels like the weight shift is not quite right. It feels like it kind of goes over there and then moves this foot off, this back foot. So his weight is actually already, if we look at the mechanics, his weight is already on this foot here. All of his weight is shifted over to this side, and his weight is on this foot fully. This foot is actually taking no weight at all. So if you act this out yourself, you can just freely move that foot to, you know, you could move it over here, you could move it over here. You could freely do that without really having to adjust the root here very much. So I would actually did some drawovers of what I would do. I'd kind of keep the weight, you know, on that shelf. His hips maybe start to come over as this leg comes over. And again, if you act this out, you'll kind of understand what I'm saying. So you get a slight reversal starting to happen through here. The foot comes out. The foot plants here. And then the whole body kind of starts to come over, but of course leading with that hip. You get a shift over, like a slight down, where the weight really takes onto this foot. The weight is now on this foot. So that means that this foot can then move, which it does. Get a kind of hold. And then the weight can, you know, his chest can overlap. This can start to come over as we put the foot down there. The weight is fully on this foot, which means this one is then free to move. So as this body moves over and comes over this foot is free to move. So it can do that adjustment. and get into its final position. And then the body can just settle into the final pose that you have. So I guess if we watch that back, hopefully it'll make more sense. I might have over animated it slightly just because I'm not a 2D animator. These things are, if I was doing this in Maya, I would be very much like going between my frames and adjusting things as I went. But obviously if you put down a drawing, it's then difficult to fix in Sync Sketch. So I think that's enough disclaimers to say I can't draw. But hopefully that kind of makes sense about the weight shifts and just making sure that all makes sense. Essentially his weight is, you know, right on this foot. So therefore this foot is free to move. This foot needs to plant over here, which will then allow his body to then come over here without falling. As the weight transfers over here, this foot becomes free. I'm just drawing over frames here, but this foot becomes free, so we can then move that over to its final position. We can then adjust the weight back over to that side, freeing up this foot that was down here to then adjust to its final position, and then settling that weight finally into the final pose. And you can kind of see how I'm like using that elbow as well, not so much the hand here. So if you're leaning on your elbow a bit more than your hand, it will just kind of allow you to transfer that weight from the elbow to the hand as we do that. It kind of feels like at the moment, if I turn off these drawings, this hand is kind of sliding in a kind of weightless way right now. Just kind of like slides back versus that kind of like peel off that you would get from that elbow and then into the hand, sort of resting on that. And I think by here you probably still want that hand, you know, resting up there. Oh, I think like I drew there. And then coming down. So by this point, the body's kind of done what it's done. And you then have a bit more of an isolated but still connected, of course, gesture on this hand to do that kind of tap on the table. I do think this gesture stood out to me as a little bit big when he taps the shelf again. It'd almost be funnier if you have him like hit it and then the shelf just kind of slowly goes, and then his hand just like slides, like his weight isn't on there, but his hand is just resting on there, and that's enough weight to kind of sell the shelf just like falling down rather than like hitting it and then hitting it again. Just feels like you're kind of repeating the same thing when really at that point he's talking and he's looking over here. We kind of want to be looking here, you know, so just continuing to, maybe there's some keep alive there, like he's kind of like strokes the shelf or something, like this is the finest oak I could harvest to make this beautiful masterpiece. But I think it's really about his face and it's kind of acting over to here. So I think I had some comments on the gestures as well. Yeah, so maybe he gestures like you have here with the prop, but maybe it happens a bit sooner. And like I said, let's lose the finger gesture, have him kind of gesture using that screwdriver. You know, whether it's a sort of bit more flamboyant or just something, let's just use that prop where we can. It kind of feels incidental to his gestures at the moment. Let's make sure we're using that prop and treating it as an extension of his body. I just want to listen to it with the audio to understand more why I said about that gesture.
Do what magicians pretend to do. Do what magicians do. What magicians pretend to do. Do what magicians pretend to do. Do what magicians pretend to do. What magicians pretend to do. What magicians pretend to do. do what magicians pretend to do. Do what magicians pretend to do. Do what magicians pretend.
I just felt like him going like pretend to do. It's just a bit like he's kind of gesturing on the big voice sound, the big sound. So he's like, do what magicians pretend to do. I feel like maybe that was a little bit over animated, and I always kind of like to gesture things not exactly on the beat. It just feels a bit more natural to me. So if he's like, what's the audio saying?
Literally do.
If he's like, do what magicians pretend to do. To me, that would feel a little more natural than going, do what magicians pretend to do. You know, if he's kind of gesturing in that middle bit, then it can be more about like the gestures on the face when it comes to that big beat. I don't know if that's why I prefer doing it, but it certainly feels a lot less overacted to me to gesture on that and do what magicians pretend to do. That just feels a little more natural to me. So yeah, just a little less on the beat, I think is the note there. What magicians pretend to do. And it's also about like gesturing at different times. Kind of feels like when you gesture here, he's got this kind of body thing going on and the screwdriver as well. If it's just much more like still and about his face and he's like, and do what magicians pretend to do, then it's kind of like you're gesturing this and then you're gesturing this in a separate way rather than kind of like waiting and going and do what magicians pretend to do. It's like breaking up that gesture into two like smaller gestures that aren't necessarily like bang on the beat. I guess it would just be a case of like acting that out and trying to be as natural as possible with it and seeing what kind of timing your reference would give you for that. But to me, that felt a little bit like it was like gesturing on the beat. Yeah, I guess. I was getting at like make that a gesture in the face, but also the head. So it's like pretend to do. And he goes into this kind of smug expression. He's like, can't you see I'm a true artist, a magician? Or I'm better than a magician. I'm a true wizard at this. And I also think it would be kind of fun if you felt like he was almost like leaning on this shelf a little bit more, like he's so confident in his shelf that he's kind of like got a little bit of weight on it. To show that, I kind of did a bit of a straight arm. It doesn't actually change the pose too much, but it would also be nice to have him react to that. And this is just an idea and it kind of goes away from what you have, but if that shelf kind of falls, he can then, the weight can be taken away from him and he can kind of react to that and get into a bit more of like a, I felt like you could be just a bit more contrasty with that final pose. So it kind of all happens and he's like, and he's just in this pose where we can then be still and be like, versus now where he actually looks at the thing. It would be cool if he just didn't look and he's just like, yeah, this is my shelf. This is what, whoa, just kind of gets taken away. The weight gets taken away from him and he's like, what, how could this possibly happen? This is I've spent so long on this. This is the hardest thing I've ever done and I still couldn't get it right. So I thought that could be fun. And obviously there will be some kind of mechanics to work out there, but essentially going into a pose and holding it as well, I feel like you're still moving a bit too much here. And I would also kind of collapse this shelf a bit faster, so that thing sort of starts to ease out and it's like the whole shelf almost just like explodes and it's gone. Not exactly exploded, but it's like that goes and everything just kind of goes like, just, it's done. So get that to kind of, because what you read, you don't read everything collapsing slowly. You read the shelf is up, you read sort of like it's starting to go, and then you read, poof, it's gone. So those are the things that are important. If you're storyboarding this, you would maybe get like one pose of ease out, and then you would get it's broken, like it's on the floor. So whatever we can do to kind of make that as quick as possible, we're just getting to the story beats a bit sooner. And we can then, if this is, resolved, if this bookshelf is on the floor, we can then look at him, focus on his reaction, which is the funny part of this, really. So we want to be looking at him, and then we want to keep the reaction kind of isolated to his face and like, what? Oh, and then, maybe there's a few different ways I think you could end this. I'm not sure, kicking it is, I mean, you can go with the kick. If you are, I feel like you could anticipate it more. Kind of feels like you step in, and I'm not sure what this pose change is really telling us here. If it's him going from like shock to angry at the thing that has happened, then I would just keep that to his face. So he's kind of like, what? And then he's sort of like, and then within that, he can just do all of that acting within that pose. There's no need to change the pose itself there. Just keep it kind of not isolated to the face, but like I keep saying, isolated but still connected to the rest of the body. So I think you just want to get him in this kind of pose and hold that pose as long as you can, and then keep it about this area here, his facial. Yeah, I guess I was just thinking of various ideas that you could do. Like he maybe looks at his screwdriver and he's like maybe it's, I don't know exactly what's going through his mind here. You've gone for he's angry, and then he kind of comes into this pose and then kicks it. If you're going to do that, I think I would definitely do a little antic before that kick to sell that more. And then also, yeah, I'm just thinking about the comedy of it, like what makes that funny? And I do think him kind of going into a sulk is kind of funny. But maybe there's something that could be funnier, like he sort of looks at, well, there's a whole variety of things you can do. The funny part is that thing has fallen to the floor. So do you even need the payoff at the end where he kicks the thing? That thing just falls to the floor and he's like, and then he just kind of freezes in that pose, looks around it, looks at his screwdriver maybe. Do you even need to go out of a pose at that point? Can you save yourself some frames, save yourself some work at the end? Can it just end in the kind of like pose? So I think that's something to think about. The kick at the end isn't like super necessary to me. It's not the part where I'm like, haha, this is a very funny animation, So it's just maybe something you could lose. Maybe just keep him in this pose. If you want to add extra acting to it, maybe he acts within this pose. Could do brings up, he's in that pose and he's just like, or just like looks at the screwdriver, maybe twists it or something. Just let's keep it isolated. Let's keep it about the face, especially as this is a lip sync. I think you said doing for a class. Yeah, this is a lip sync I'm doing for a class. So I don't think you necessarily need all those extra mechanics at the end. I think you could resolve this a little faster, and I think that would just help to make things funnier, but also you can then use that time for the rest of the animation, which I think is where it's worth using that time. So I think that's everything I had. Thank you very much for sending this in for review. Much appreciated. And if you guys are interested in getting a review, you can check out keyframecoach.com and grab one there. But yeah, thanks a lot. See you soon.